everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Stewart Whitson, Senior Director of Federal Affairs at the FGA. Stewart, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me on.
Of course, Republicans and Democrats alike have said that there is wasteful spending in the government, but of course, there has always been a point of contention of where exactly to cut. And since Donald Trump came into office once again, Elon Musk and his DOGE department have really hit the ground running at slashing what they consider wasteful spending in the government. And you testified at the House Oversight Committee's Subcommittee on delivering on government efficiency. And I want to read part of your opening statement. You said this, quote, "Rather than applauding the work of DOGE in helping to end such wasteful spending, some have launched a coordinated campaign to try to demonize Mr. Musk with the hope of somehow shifting focus away from the disastrous waste, fraud, and abuse that occurred on their watch." So, to start off the conversation, can you talk to us a little bit about your thinking here, your testimony, and the hearing at large?
Yeah, so I think the truth is the Democrats have a big problem on their hands. And so the problem is that on the campaign trail, President Trump promised to launch this DOGE effort. And lo and behold, just a month into the administration, he's launched it and he's delivering it. And so already we've seen, like you said, a litany of wasteful spending coming down, and not just wasteful, but harmful, reckless spending. $59 million to house illegal aliens in luxury hotels in New York, $32,000 for a transgender comic book. So these kinds of things, common sense Americans can see on their face, and right away they know, this is crazy. This needs to stop right away. And so the problem the Democrats are facing right now is President Trump's delivering on that promise. The other thing is we're just scratching the surface. So every day new things come out, and they know that they're in panic mode because new wasteful spending comes out every single day. And then the third thing is all this happened when? On their watch, right? All this wasteful spending was on Biden's watch, on their watch. And so they are between a rock and a hard place. You can either applaud the president's efforts and set yourself up for failure in the midterms, or you can do which is their only option, is to try to go after the messenger. But that's another problem they have. President Trump's approval ratings, record high. And so that leaves Elon Musk. And so that was kind of the big focus of my testimony is, look, they are going after Elon Musk because that's the only option they have, but it's not working.
You are a director at the Foundation for Government Accountability. So I want to talk about what critics are saying about this, like you highlighted, in a moment. But before that, I want to talk about numbers, because when you look at the national deficit, we are at $1.8 trillion. So where do you see the most egregious or unnecessary government spending?
Well, I mean, it is across the board. If the DOGE effort has taught us anything, it's every single program has this. The one I really focused on in the hearing is one that I don't think gets as much attention as it should, but that's improper payments in Medicaid. And so again, for your audience, we're not talking about Medicare, we're talking about Medicaid. And when we talk about improper payments, 80% of those fall into a category of basically ineligible people getting the benefit. And so what does that mean? It means people that under the law aren't entitled to the benefit in the first place are getting it. And so we're the government to target this and just make sure, again, that only the people who Medicaid is designed for, so the elderly, disabled, children in poverty, the people who really need the program, to make sure they get it, and the people that aren't legally entitled to get it don't. That could save over $1 trillion over 10 years. And so that was a big focus too, is how do you do that? And there's a couple fixes that are pretty easy that the current makeup of the Congress can achieve pretty quickly, and they'll have huge benefits.
Talk to us about that a little bit. What are those fixes there? Let's say you were in a meeting right now and I'm Elon Musk, what would you tell me to do immediately when it comes to the misuse of Medicare? Or Medicaid, misuse of Medicaid.
Well, if I'm talking to Elon Musk, I say, hey, keep doing what you're doing, flag the improper payments so you bring attention to that. And then as the president's commanding him to do, find these things, and then the president will use executive power where he can. But to fix these problems with Medicaid, it really is time for Congress to step up. And so that's why, and so to fix the Medicaid program, there's a few things they can do. Number one, there was a rule that the Biden administration, and it's actually, this is something that can be done on the executive level, but a rule that the Biden administration pushed forward called the Medicaid streamlining rule. And I don't want to go into too much detail, but in a nutshell, what it did is it handcuffed states and kept them from removing people from receiving Medicaid benefits who the states knew were ineligible. So it's basically a Biden rule that did things like said, hey, you're not allowed to check someone, check to make sure someone still qualifies for the program more than once a year. But you and I know that over a year, lots of things happen and change. People get jobs who didn't have jobs. People sometimes die, and so they don't qualify for the program. There's all these kind of things, and so they handcuff them from doing those kind of things. And so removing this rule is something the executive branch could do, but also Congress can as well. And so if Congress does it, that would prevent a future administration that wanted to just put that rule right back in place with a stroke of a pen. If Congress takes this on and gets rid of this, then it can't come back.
Obviously, you're pleased with the DOGE department, Elon Musk's efforts here. Some would say he's using a hatchet approach opposed to a scalpel approach. The DOGE department says, based on their receipts, that they have gotten rid of $55 billion in spending. An NPR investigation said it's $2 billion. But either way, that's in the billions after just about a month right now. So do you think that hatchet approach is the best way forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple answers. One is it seems like a hatchet approach just because of the depth of fraud and waste that's going on. And so that's one reason. The other reason I think that the approach may seem a little aggressive from some people on the outside is because they are left with that as their only real option. And the reason is because of the entrenched bureaucracy. And so I do. And so this was another point I tried to hammer home in my testimony is that, look, you can make all these changes. You can stop the wasteful spending that's already out the door. You can try to create rules that prevent future wasteful spending. But what do all these instances of wasteful spending have in common? An entrenched bureaucrat in an agency somewhere had to approve this payment. They had to hit send, fire the payment off and send it to someone on the other end. And so if you want to fix these problems, you have to fix the bureaucracy. And so the fact is right now, even though President Trump has been elected to office, a lot of his political appointees aren't in their seats yet. The ones that are coming into agencies that are filled with folks that have been, here since the Biden administration. And so we can even, see from press reports, open hostility as the DOGE folks come to access systems that they're entitled to under the law that the president has commanded them to go look into, people blocking them from that. We have reports of entrenched bureaucrats saying it's time to dig in against the administration. And so with all of these things going on, I think the president, in a sense, is left with only one option, and that's to do a more aggressive halt of everything. And if I make a comparison, if you came into a new business that you had just purchased and you got wind that there was just wasteful spending going out the door, would you not go to the bank and say, hey, we need to halt everything for a second until I get a handle on what is legit and what's not? That now there could be some good legitimate creditors on the other side that their payment could be slowed down a little bit, but you would quickly explain to them, hey, I just want to make sure that we don't bankrupt this company, so you still have someone to do business with, and so you have to figure out those things. And so I think that's kind of on a smaller scale an idea of what's going on, with some of the spending that's being halted.
I would love to talk to you about what critics are saying, because you mentioned that earlier. They've argued that DOGE has done everything from, quote, fueling chaos and corruption, that was a Democratic congresswoman's words, to jeopardizing national security and safety with those FIA cuts. So what do you say to that? What do you say to those people that are saying, hey, Elon Musk really does have that hatchet, it does feel chaotic, and it is jeopardizing the safety in this country?
Well, I think it's a laughable proposition to say that identifying wasteful spending is fueling corruption. Identifying wasteful spending is the path to stopping corruption. And so if the left truly thinks that, if the left thinks that an unprecedented level of transparency, that a simple audit coming into the government and looking at all the expenditures and identifying wasteful spending, if they think that's leads to corruption, then I think they need to reevaluate their definition. I think it also brings up another point. I do think there is some corruption here. I think we're going to find some corruption here, but I don't think we're going to find corruption on the part of what Elon Musk is doing with the DOGE effort. I think we're going to find corruption in some of these expenditures. And so take, for example, again, the example I gave earlier, $32,000 for a transgender comic book in Peru. My question is, who's the organization in Peru that got the $32,000? Are they connected at all to the administration or to the person that hit send on that check? Is there some sort of is a spouse or something working for a nonprofit that runs that organization. And so I think the left knows this. And so so the last thing they should be doing is flagging corruption, because I think they're right. We are going to find a lot of corruption as they continue to dig, but I don't think that corruption is going to be connected to the Trump administration. I think it's going to be connected to the previous administration.
I know you're saying that this problem is entrenched. So is just getting rid of some jobs, is that fixing the problem? Do you think that that's a temporary fix? Or do you think that there needs to be a whole entire structural change, a reorganization that gets to the root of this wasteful spending?
Absolutely. I think it's going to be more than just personnel. And I think the president's kind of signaled that's his intent, is to basically look at organizations and look what he's doing. This isn't unprecedented. This happens periodically in government. You create agencies 20, 30 years ago that maybe made sense at the time, maybe not, but maybe they did make sense at the time. But 20 or 30 years passes, it's healthy to take a reevaluation and say, do we still need that? The other thing that happens over time in federal government is you have mission creep and you have natural growth that happens with agencies. And so sometimes you can start with a group, a unit, a department that has a job, and only that department does that job. But in DC, over time, you'll find that across agencies and organizations, that same mission will start being created across the government. And so what it does is it creates inefficiency, it creates redundancy. Sometimes there's competing efforts, because there may be more than one right way to achieve an objective. And if two different groups are trying to achieve the same objective, that can cause problems. All this to say is it's very healthy to come in and just take an evaluation of everything and try to fix make those structural type changes.
I know that there have been some complaints about people losing their jobs. It seems, or they've said it seemed almost at random. We saw the FAA have some cuts, and this came less than a month after we saw that horrific plane crash in DC. We've heard of veterans losing their jobs. Even Jesse Waters said, hey, my veteran friend got what he said doged, essentially. Do you think when it comes to cutting jobs, there should be more of or less than this sort of seemingly random approach?
Yeah, I think so. I would back up. I'd say I don't know that it's as random as a lot of the media may make it out to be. With that said, there will certainly be really good, honest, dedicated, great people. I mean, I should say I spent a decade in the FBI before I joined the organization I'm with. So I know that 90% of the federal workers are great people who love our Constitution and work hard every day. And so is it possible that some good people might lose their jobs in this reshuffling? Of course. But I think, my advice to them would be reapply and get back in. And I think I would expect that that'll happen, that there will be an effort to try to pull some people back in who maybe shouldn't have been. That of course can happen. But I also think that a lot of times they kind of, it's a useful narrative to make this, a scare tactic, if you will. It's like manufactured, like, that there's going to be some sort of calamity that's going to come when you move positions out. And the fact of the nature is we can look to COVID and we can see that overnight, we basically went to 50% manpower across the government. And guess what? The mission still got accomplished. And so the point being, there is a lot of room to remove some people. It's never a great thing, but this happens in the private sector all the time, right? Companies come in, and sometimes that happens where jobs have to be cut. And so you just try to help them as much as possible to find a new position. I know if I were in government and people were lost, I would be, spending hours, and I'm sure there's people doing this, just trying to find them another place to land and be as helpful as you can for the good, honest people. And then being like,
It's really interesting because these cuts and the DOGE effort has been fast and furious, and there's been critics of that speed saying, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! Slow down, slow down! This is coming too fast." And then people are applauding it, saying, "Hey, usually government movements get stuck in the mud here, and they're really going fast and making action and making swift change." So, what do you want to see next from DOGE? Because you said at the beginning of this conversation, "Hey, they've already cut billions, and this is just the beginning." And what do you think the end goal is here? Because this was touted at the beginning as a temporary department. So what do you think the end will look like?
yeah. So I think, so for DOGE, I'd say keep moving forward. No one should be off limits. I think and President Trump has made that clear. I mean, he's already identified Department of Defense, which, is going to come in and take a hard look there. So there's probably a ton of wasteful spending, a ton of savings that can be found on the defense side as well, while still maintaining national security, keeping us safe. But path forward, I'd say DOGE keeps doing what they're doing. There will come a point where they've identified everything that needs to be done and they won't be needed at that executive level. But that's when it's time for Congress to step in and act. And there's a number of things Congress can do. We already talked about the streamlining rule, but the other big one is the REINS Act. And so the REINS Act is the regulations from the executive in need of scrutiny. It's basically this idea that before a federal agency can create a new rule, which is basically the equivalent of a law that costs $100 million or more, they have to make sure Congress approves it first. And so this kind of a law, what it would do is it would prevent the kind of reckless spending we saw under the previous administration that came from the executive branch. President Biden spent more than $1 trillion of US taxpayer money through executive fiat by unilaterally increasing food stamps overnight, just with the stroke of a pen. He didn't ask Congress's permission. Congress didn't weigh in on that. He did that overnight and to a cost of over $20 billion a year. He also, the student loan cancellations. He just did that with a stroke of a pen, didn't ask Congress because there's no way they would have approved it. Went to the Supreme Court, got struck down. What did he do? He did it anyway. And so the REINS Act would stop all that and would just say, hey, before you do a big new rule that's going to affect the lives of millions of people, you need to make sure Congress is okay with that. And so that's a big thing that Congress can do to help kind of take what DOGE is doing and make it permanent. And that's like the last point is just everything DOGE is doing is great, but it's being done through executive power. And so what does that mean? It means a future administration can use executive power to undo all that, again, with the stroke of a pen. And so if you want to make the DOGE reforms and the DOGE cost cutting permanent, then you need to pass the REINS Act and Congress needs to get involved.
That's a really interesting point. This is my last question. Do you think that this is setting a precedent where we're going to see DOGE-like departments come in every 4 years, every new administration to cut things, to undo things, and then it kind of be like almost this ping pong game?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't think of it like a ping pong game because it's not really changing policy, but I think that would be healthy. I would love to see if every administration, and again, cutting wasteful spending, it should be nonpartisan, right? No matter what political party you come in, if an administration comes in after President Trump and they want to go through and look for even more wasteful spending, then that's great. They should. That's exactly what they do. I think and I think everyone would applaud that. I think even President Trump would welcome it. So hopefully, I think that's the great thing about DOGE is it's something that's captured the imagination of Americans across the country. And why is that? Because this is common sense. Because they look at the type of spending that's going out and they think it's unjustifiable, and they're just happy to see that actions being, finally being taken.
Stewart, I really appreciate your time today. I know you had a busy week testifying on the Hill there. You are welcome back anytime because I know, as you and I have talked about, DOGE is moving at such a clip here that I'm sure we will have many exciting conversations down the pike. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks again for having me on.